Half of all millionaires were created during downturns, and half of all bankruptcies were too. Which side you end up on will depend entirely on how you act before the next storm hits. A storm is gathering right now, but to understand what's coming, we have to travel back, far back. Imagine stepping into a time machine constructed from old newspapers, shattered stock tickers, and bank ledgers stained with panic. Each pull of its iron lever hurls you into one of the 17 downturns that carved their scars into the last century. The first pull throws you into 1929, where a nation celebrating too brightly forgot the party had to end. Another jolt sends you to 1937, when the patient tried to stand before the wounds had healed. Then, 1945, when peace itself delivered a shockwave. 1948, a quiet freeze settling over an anxious nation. 1953, a post-war whiplash few expected. 1957, when money suddenly became too expensive. 1960, a recession that whispered instead of screamed. 1969, the moment the long boom finally lost its breath. 1973, the oil ambush that suffocated the world. 1980, inflation's last stand. 1981, the deep freeze that finally broke it. 1987, the day markets forgot gravity. 1990, the slow burn that crept across the country. 2001, the dot-com dream that burst like fragile glass. 2007, the meltdown that froze the planet. 2020, the 2-month crash that stopped the world cold. And finally, 2022, the return of inflation, an enemy not seen in 40 years. 17 downturns, 17 storms, 17 reminders that the world will always rise, fall, and rise again. But before we dive into the first crash, we need to be clear about the language of these storms, the words people throw around on TV that most never really define. When I say recession, I'm not talking about a bad headline or a rough week in the market. A recession is a stretch of months, sometimes a year or more, when the entire economy slows down. Businesses earn less, people lose jobs, spending drops. It's like the economy catching a cold, uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but usually survivable. A depression is something else entirely. That's when the cold turns into pneumonia. A depression is deeper, longer, and more damaging. Millions lose jobs, banks fail, and it can take years, sometimes an entire decade, to truly recover. We've really only seen one true Great Depression in modern American history, from 1929 into the early 1930s. Then there's the word crash. A crash is about speed. It's when markets fall so fast that people feel like the floor disappeared overnight. Prices don't just drift down, they plunge. A crash can happen inside a recession, or trigger one, or sometimes pass quickly and leave the real economy mostly intact. You'll also hear about a bear market and a correction. A bear market usually means stocks are down 20% or more from their peak, the kind of drop that makes people question everything they believed about investing. A correction is smaller, often around 10%. It's the market's way of saying, you were getting a little too confident. And then, there's the quiet villain running underneath many of these stories: inflation. Inflation is when prices rise and your money quietly buys less than it did before. A little inflation is normal. Too much for too long is a slow-motion kind of theft. It steals from savers, from workers, from anyone who isn't prepared. So when we talk about recessions, depressions, crashes, bear markets, corrections, and inflation, we're not using jargon. We're naming the different ways that storms show up. Now that you speak the language of the storm, it's time to live through the first one. The first stop is 1929. America is dancing on the edge of a dream. Jazz spills from clubs. People buy stocks as if wealth is guaranteed. Many borrow money to buy even more, believing the good times will never stop. But in October, the music dies. What follows becomes the longest economic darkness in American history. 43 months of collapse, a 90% stock market plunge, 9,000 banks disappearing, 1 in 4 Americans out of work. A father walks miles to the bank he prays reopened, only to find the doors nailed shut forever. America only begins to heal once it rebuilds its financial foundation from scratch, because optimism without discipline always ends the same way. Then we're thrown into 1937. 8 years after the crash, recovery almost feels real. Factories hum, families dare to hope again, but leaders think the crisis is behind them. They tighten too early, and the fragile recovery collapses like a patient trying to stand before the wounds are closed. Industrial output falls 30%, stocks drop nearly half, unemployment surges again, a painful reminder that a rebound is not a recovery. Then comes 1945, when peace delivers its own shock. Millions of soldiers return to factories with no orders. Wartime production evaporates overnight. GDP falls 12% in 8 months. And yet, from this collapse comes the birth of the American dream. Suburbs rise, highways stretch across the land, cars fill driveways. Peace crushed the economy, but reinvention revived it. The next jump is 1948. A quiet recession settles over the country like early frost. Factories slow, demand fades, households hesitate, unemployment nearly doubles in 11 months, yet recovery sparks the moment credit loosens and confidence returns. The economy recovers the moment people believe it can. Then we land in 1953. The Korean War ends. Military spending collapses overnight. Factories stall, workers are sent home. The economy contracts nearly 3% until industries pivot from weapons to washing machines, from tanks to televisions. Adaptability becomes quiet power. Our next stop is 1957. America is booming, homes rising, cars shining. But interest rates creep upward, quietly choking off borrowing. Car lots empty. Construction freezes, factories slow. Output plunges 14% in 8 months. When borrowing becomes affordable again, the machine restarts instantly. The cost of money controls the rhythm of the economy. Then, 1960 arrives with a recession that whispers. Factories ease up, housing cools, elections cloud confidence. For 10 months, the slowdown creeps until unemployment reaches 7%, then fades as optimism returns. Sometimes you're inside a storm long before you feel the rain. In 1969, 2 decades of prosperity finally lose momentum. Inflation creeps, rates tighten, consumers hesitate. For 11 months, the boom gasps for air. Every boom believes it will last forever, until it doesn't. Then comes 1973. The morning America wakes up to gas prices that have quadrupled. Cars stretch for blocks. Grocery bills surge. Inflation explodes past 12%. Factories stall. Growth collapses. 16 suffocating months follow. Inflation is a thief that steals slowly until everything is gone. Next comes 1980, when inflation refuses to die. Prices rise. Paychecks shrink in real time. The Federal Reserve unleashes shock therapy. Interest rates rocket upward. For 6 months, the economy staggers under the weight of inflation's last stand. Then, 1981 arrives with the deep freeze. Unemployment hits 10.8%. Housing collapses. Factories fall silent. For 16 months, it feels like time itself has frozen. Until at last, inflation breaks. Sometimes pain is the down payment for long-term peace. Suddenly, we're thrust into 1987. The day the market forgets gravity. No war, no scandal, no warning. And the stock market falls 22% in a single day. Fear moves faster than facts. The next stop is 1990. Oil spikes, commercial property cracks, banks freeze lending. It isn't a crash, it's a tightening, a slow burn spreading across the country until the damage is undeniable. Then comes 2001. The internet feels unstoppable. Hope becomes a currency. Companies with no profits fly in value. Then the dot-com bubble bursts. Trillions vanish. Offices empty. Dreams collapse. Just as recovery begins, 9/11 strikes, and the world stops. Dreams built too fast often fall just as quickly. Our next stop is the meltdown of 2007. Homes are treated like lottery tickets. Banks hand out loans like candy. People flip houses like trading cards until the invisible mountain of risk finally cracks. Stocks fall 57%, families lose homes, banks fail, retirements evaporate. For 18 crushing months, the world faces its deepest crisis since the Great Depression. Leverage is a miracle on the way up and a monster on the way down. Then comes 2020. The 2-month crash that stopped the world cold. Cities empty, flights halt, businesses shut their doors, markets fall 34% in just 33 days. Then, the fastest comeback in history arrives. Trillions in support, rates to zero, stimulus checks lifting markets like rockets. Crisis destroys systems unless action is faster than fear. Finally, we reach 2022. The unexpected return of inflation, an enemy not seen in 40 years. Prices surge, budgets snap, interest rates spike, tech collapses, real estate cools. Cheap money always sends a bill, and it always arrives. 17 downturns, 17 storms, 17 moments when the world stopped breathing, and 17 times it learned to breathe again. Through all of it, one truth survives. Markets change, people don't, but those who prepare, those who learn, those who study the storms are the ones who rise after every crash. Because the next storm always comes. The only question is whether you'll be ready. Start early, think sharp, learn right. That's your clear path.